Good morning, Europe. Thank you for starting your day with us. Here's a look at Wednesday's top stories.
The governor of Ukraine's Donetsk region urges people to leave as Russian shelling intensifies and an advance of troops is expected to follow. Downing Street scrambles to replace two senior cabinet ministers who say they've quit due to lack of confidence in Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And Italy struggles through its worst drought in 70 years. Water rationing during the day hasn't been ruled out and some towns are having water brought in.
The governor of Donetsk is urging people to leave the region as Russian shelling intensifies ahead of what is normally followed by troop advances. 2 days after President Vladimir Putin declared victory in seizing an eastern Ukraine province essential to his wartime aims, his troops have escalated their offensive in the neighbouring province. He's captured Luhansk and now he's targeting Donetsk.
There are around 350,000 citizens who stayed here, compared to 1.6 million who lived here before. It's a very significant quantity. That's why my main goal, and I will talk about this with local administrations, and I will be more severe this time. Despite what people say, I do care about their homes and their lives, but they should leave.
At least 12 million people have fled their homes since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, according to the United Nations. More than 5 million have left for neighbouring countries, while 7 million people are still displaced inside Ukraine itself. Although thousands have returned home, especially to cities like Kyiv, while Putin's military plans remain unclear, there could be more mass evacuations.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you.
There's been a scramble at number 10 Downing Street to limit the damage dealt to Boris Johnson's premiership after two of his most senior cabinet ministers quit. They say they've lost confidence in his leadership. Both former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and former Health Secretary Sajid Javid handed in their resignations amid Johnson's shifting explanations about his handling of a sexual misconduct scandal. In a devastating message, Sunak said the public rightly expect government to be conducted properly, competently and seriously. I recognise this may be my last ministerial job, but I believe these standards are worth fighting for.
I want to begin today by renewing my apology to the House.
Johnson has been forced to backtrack on earlier statements about his appointment to a key party job of a colleague who is now embroiled in sexual misconduct allegations. It's only the latest scandal to hit Johnson, who last month narrowly survived a vote of no confidence, triggered by similarly shifting stories about lockdown-breaking parties. Former Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi is now stepping into Sunak's shoes as Treasury Chief, and most of the cabinet is remaining loyal. But the drama of the day is being seen by critics as the beginning of the end for Johnson.
There appears to be a critical momentum building against Boris Johnson remaining as the British Prime Minister. The trigger was pulled by two of his most senior, most respected cabinet ministers on a race between his survival or removal. Some smaller ministerial names have also resigned, so will others search their souls today and reach the same conclusion? Now, there's nothing in any rule books that says a Prime Minister must resign, even if senior colleagues turn on him or her. But these resignations are serious blows to Johnson's authority as leader, although it has to be said that resigning is not in Johnson's DNA. He's given us plenty of examples to prove that he will always try to tough things out. And because he survived a leadership push just a few weeks ago, Conservative Party regulations say that Johnson is immune from another challenge until the summer of next year. But those rules can be rewritten, and there's already talk that could happen. So perhaps that will be the fate for a Prime Minister whose critics say he acts as if the rules don't apply to him. Ty Enright, Euronews in London.
Italy's worst drought in 70 years has prompted the government to declare a state of emergency in 5 northern provinces, including Lombardy and Piedmont. The Civil Protection Department has failed to rule out water rationing during the day, and restrictions have already been imposed in some areas, with many towns having to have water brought in by trucks. In some, the supply is being cut off completely at night. The shortage has paralysed the rice and corn production around the River Po in the north, and the country's Farmers Association estimates this year's lack of rainfall will cost producers over €3 billion. The well-being of livestock is also an expensive concern for farmers. We have a ventilation system for the cows to help them cope with the heat. This plant costs €65,000. Then there are the power costs. The fans run 24 hours a day. They don't even stop at night. The issue has been exacerbated by much less snow over the winter, especially in the Southern Alps, which has contributed to a lower snowmelt flowing into rivers, a consequence, say scientists, of climate change caused by humans.
We are in the Emilia-Romagna region, one of the 5 Italian regions where the government declared a state of emergency late on Monday. The government also allocated over €35 million to help these regions cope with the effects of the current emergency, in particular the drought that has been affecting the country in the past few weeks. We're literally a few minutes' drive from one of the Po River's most affected area by the drought, where the riverbed has now become visible, and that's because water levels have dramatically decreased, and that's because the amount of precipitation in the country's northern regions has decreased by half since the beginning of the year, affecting not only the agricultural sector but also availability of drinking water. And that's why water restrictions have been imposed and implemented in several municipalities across the region, including this one where we are now. As you can see, the fountain behind me actually was switched off as a result of that, a decision that the local mayor took to try and save as much water as possible. Giorgio Orlandi for Euronews in Fontanellato.
Ireland already had a housing shortage before the war in Ukraine began. The pressure on accommodation, which is already at a maximum, prompted these recent exchanges in the Irish Parliament.
All of this means that Ireland's capacity to provide even the bare minimum of emergency accommodation and shelter to its own citizens and those genuinely fleeing war is being severely undermined.
In response, the Irish Housing Minister was having none of it.
His government have been very, very clear, particularly in relation to the response to our friends from Ukraine, that we will take in as many Ukrainian citizens fleeing a brutal war vested upon them through no fault of their own, and we will not bring forward any caps in that regard.
Recent surveys have revealed that the number of migrants coming into Ireland has exceeded the number of houses on the market. The increasing number of migrants and refugees coming to Ireland from places like Libya, Syria and Ukraine has resulted in demand outpacing supply and massive increases in property prices. Calls by other independent TDs to cap the number of refugees coming into Ireland were dismissed this week by the Irish Prime Minister.
My experience of people across the length and breadth of this country is of a great warmth, and communities are working with the Ukrainian community to make them feel welcome in Ireland. And I would ask the 2 deputies maybe to reflect on that aspect of it as well, and just to take that on board.
The number of people coming to this country from Ukraine has put pressure on accommodation, particularly in the east of the country. However, the Irish Prime Minister has made it quite clear that as long as the war continues in Ukraine and its people are seeking a place of refuge, Ireland will continue to be a land of welcomes. This is Ken Murray for Euronews in Dublin.
A tented city has sprung up east of Saudi Arabia's Mecca to accommodate thousands of people participating in the biggest Hajj pilgrimage since the COVID pandemic began. Many new arrivals have already begun performing the first ritual, the walking 7 times round the Kaaba, the large black cubic structure at the centre of the Grand Mosque. Officially, the event starts Thursday.